I've been circling around a question that seems, on the surface, almost too obvious to ask. What does it take to make a good leader? It's the sort of question that gets answered too quickly. Everyone has a take. Every book jacket promises to unlock it. Every panel discussion claims to explore it. But when you sit with it, really sit with it, you start to notice how fragile many of those answers feel in the real world. We've built entire industries around leadership development. US companies alone spend close to $14 billion each year trying to develop leaders through coaching, simulation, succession planning, assessments, and more. But despite all that effort, most leaders, especially the ones newly promoted, feel unprepared, and it shows. Research suggests that 30 to 50% of new executives fail within the first 18 months. The promise is big. The payoff is blurry. And it's not just the leaders who feel the strain. Companies, organizations, even churches regularly struggle to fill leadership roles with people who are both capable and willing. The gap is two-sided. Would-be leaders feel unprepared and under-equipped, while institutions that need them often can't find or nurture the kind of leadership they're looking for. And despite all the investment, the pipeline remains thin. Only about 11% of organizations say they have a strong bench ready to step up. Nearly 80% report chronic gaps in leadership development. Many can't even fill half their open leadership roles. What's going on? We built the leadership infrastructure, executive coaching programs, succession plans, and the assessments, but the results haven't caught up. The leadership gap hasn't closed. If anything, it's widened. It's not just a talent shortage. It's a deeper question of alignment between what we say leadership is and what we reward, and what we actually need. And until we face that mismatch head on, we'll keep mistaking polish for preparedness and presence for substance. I've seen people with all the right credentials fold under pressure. People who've gone through the very pipelines and development tracks meant to prepare them. They had the titles, the training, the mentorships, but actual leadership has a way of exposing what credentials can't cover, because no amount of training can prepare you for the rigors of actually making the decisions that are consequential and have real life stakes. And in the rubble that follows after people have cracked under pressure, I've also seen others step up unexpectedly. Those who never saw themselves as leaders, but carried something essential when it mattered most. And I've watched organizations misread both groups time and time again. It's easy to blame the programs, or the trainers, or the systems that elevate style over substance. But lately I've been wondering whether the real issue sits further upstream in how we define leadership in the first place. We talk about natural leaders as if it's a genetic trait. But I think that it comes from a deeper confusion about how leadership actually emerges. Despite an entire industry devoted to cracking the code, something about leadership still feels elusive, almost mystical. So we default to surface level proxies: confidence, polish, visibility. We reduce it to vibes. We over-index on presence instead of substance, and charisma instead of clarity, and in doing so, we miss it. We need to start by asking a more basic question. What is leadership? Before we talk about what makes a good leader, we need to be clear about what leadership actually is. I think leadership is the act of creating the conditions for movement towards clarity, towards purpose, towards collective action. It's not about being in charge. It's about taking responsibility for shaping what happens next. It surfaces in moments of uncertainty and tension, when people need to make sense of complexity and decide what matters. Sometimes that comes through positional authority, but often it doesn't. Leadership is less about where you sit in the org chart and more about how you help others move through the unknown. It's about influence, direction, trust, and presence in moments that count. The actual work of leadership when the spotlight is gone and decisions still have to be made is the part that we don't talk about enough. This work outside the spotlight, this invisible labor, isn't abstract or mystical. It's practical, high stakes, and sometimes grueling. It looks like discernment, yes, but also wisdom sharpened by repetition and growth that can sometimes be painful. It means learning when to intervene and when to hold back. It takes backbone when stakes are high and backlash is likely. It involves absorbing pressure so others can keep moving. It's the steady voice in a meeting full of tension, the unpopular decision that keeps the bigger picture intact, the quiet moment of clarity when everything else is noise. This kind of leadership doesn't often get celebrated, but it's actually what holds systems, teams, and missions together. If you're in a place where traditional answers aren't cutting it, where the playbook feels thin, or you've been told you're not leadership material because you don't fit the mold, maybe the problem isn't you. Maybe the problem is the mold itself. Because here's the truth. Some of the most essential leadership isn't happening at the top of the org chart. It's happening at the edges, among people who never sought power but stepped in anyway. The ones who rose to the occasion when the designated leader failed, when no one else stepped in, when the progress mattered more than the position. They filled the gap when someone above them was stuck in a feud, distracted by ego, or simply overwhelmed. They led not without assignment, but because it was necessary. Sometimes the most effective leaders were overlooked because they didn't have the right vibe, appearing to be too quiet, too different, too unpolished. But when the crisis hit, they kept their heads. When the systems needed fresh thinking, they saw what others couldn't. When outdated structures began to crumble, they imagined new paths forward. We would do well to stop looking only for leaders who fit the part and start paying closer attention to the ones already doing the work. When we return to the question, what makes a good leader really? The answer is more nuanced than we'd like to admit. Is it the person who was trained and groomed and handed the title and ushered into the spotlight? Sometimes. Is it the person who stepped in without being asked, who carried the weight when others backed away? Often. Is it the one who looked and sounded the part, who exuded confidence and polish? Occasionally. But the truth is, good leadership doesn't come from a single mold. It emerges in tension and takes shape under pressure. It shows up in boardrooms and break rooms, from center stage and from the margins. It isn't always rewarded, but it's often indispensable. And maybe the real measure of a good leader isn't whether they match our expectations, but whether they live things clearer, stronger, and more whole than they found them. And that's the question we keep circling. And maybe that's the point. Good leadership can't be reduced to a formula. But if we're willing to look beyond the usual markers, we just might see it happening all around us.